Hello, this is the introduction to Seminar 8 on victims of crime, and we look at specific types of crime. When we talk about victims and victimology as a general field, of course, such a broad topic that I decided to concentrate on certain types of victims who also from a psychological point of view pose quite a lot of interest in terms also of intervention, prevention. So the course will look at different aspects, this specific seminar. There's also an exercise attached to it you can do once you've finished watching these slides, or if you have already done so. It's just an anonymous test. It's not an exam, it's like a questionnaire where certain questions are asked to you. That's just an idea to get into the topic of victims of crime. When we talk about criminology, often it's about crime, who commits crime, what are the circumstances, what are the risk factors of those who offend. Now, I'm a victimologist myself. I define myself like that simply because my studies and my field of research and interest, and also my clinical activities, have been for more than 20 years in the direction of victims. Well, actually, I look at the problem from all perspectives. So we'll talk about victims of crime, who they are, and compare also to other forms of victim, for instance, from natural disaster. We'll talk a little bit about legislation, not in full details, because of course we don't have time. We'll see if it's possible to define victims according to different typologies. Is it possible to identify why people become victims? Are there some characteristics which make a person more vulnerable than others? And we will address that. And then we'll talk about numbers and the dark numbers. How do we know if someone is victimized? Should we look at official statistics, police records? Is that enough to have a full picture, an exact, accurate picture of how many people are victimized? Things about yourself or people you know. Is it that automatic that you go and report to the police, for instance, if you're victimized? Well, it depends. And this is shown by research. It depends from what happened. If your car was stolen, or if somebody broke into your house, then yes, likely, also due to insurance issues. Not so much perhaps because you hope that the person in charge of this burglary or this theft would be caught, but also for very understandable practical reason. But what about other crimes, violent crimes, where it's up to the victim to decide to let police know about what happened? Well, we will address this specific type of crimes because, again, as I mentioned, they require specific also preparation by the criminal justice system, the police who are involved in these specific forms of crime. In this seminar, so we will address specific victims, meaning those who are victims of stalking, the so-called domestic violence or intimate partner violence, and sexual violence. We'll refer to, based on the definition provided by your textbook, your main textbook, about what is the difference between recurrent victimization, repeat victimization, and re-victimization. They sound all the same, but they have short, small differences, and it's important to understand it from a theoretical point of view when also comes to research or intervention. We'll talk about, when we think about victimology, should talk about consequences of victimology, victimization, meaning what happens after somebody has been victimized, which is of interest for different professionals in different ways, so the material, physical damage, and the psychological one. Which is most important really depends on the profession, so it's not really the same for everybody. Talking about stalking, as I mentioned to you before, we will start from the definition, the legal definition. It varies actually from country to country. And then we look at the psychological dimension of victims of this type of crimes. The same applies for domestic violence, or so-called also intimate partner violence, and the relationship with homicide. sexual violence, rape. Again, to deal thoroughly with all of these topics really requires a whole master, ideally, because so much being said, written, researched, known, both from the research point of view in terms of knowledge, theories, but also in terms of how this translates into practice, into the role of the criminologist, whether it's a sociologist, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a psychiatrist, whether it's a psychologist. So this we will give some elements to think about. Those of you, of course, who are then interested to look at the topics in more details, it's of course up to you, and you will have some material to read further some of these aspects we will deal during this seminar. This is your main reference text. There's of course much more, but I think this book is quite comprehensive in addressing the topic of victimology in quite some details and updated, which is also very important. Bye.